Hi, welcome to School Committee Update with Andre Green. Hi, Andre. Ward 4.
Hi, it's nice to be here.
I'm Sarah Fishman. Hello in 10 Hills. That's where you are, right?
That's where I am, Governor Winthrop Road.
So I want to start, if it's okay with you, just with a little bio, you know, how long you've been on the school committee and how long you've lived here and that kind of thing.
Sure. So I moved to Somerville the day I graduated college in 2001. And with the exception of 3 years I spent in Cambridge, I've been here ever since. I got priced out of Somerville and then priced back in. I have served on the school committee here, so representing Ward 4 since January of 2016, so I'm in my third term. By day, I am a nonprofit executive. I currently run a funded collaborative based in the Boston Foundation. So I've spent, the last 20 years now working in and around education, anti-poverty, homelessness, arts and culture, but always with a eye towards the work that brings me to the school committee, which is how is it that we create systems that break up cycles of intergenerational poverty? And for me, that leads with education. So I spent like 2 years working with fair tests, working with standardized testing reform. I've been a fifth grade teacher. I've done IT consulting for private schools around technology issues. So
wow, you've done a
pretty background, yeah.
A lot that's applicable to your elected position. And you have, pardon?
I like to think so, yes. And I'm also the father of a first grader.
That was what I was going to ask next. So since you've mentioned her on Facebook, I figure I was allowed to ask. So her name?
Yes.
Maddie, right?
Maddie, yes.
And where is she, a first grader? Well, you don't have to tell me that.
At the Healy.
Okay.
She's a first grader at the Healy. So, well, actually, right now, she's a first grader downstairs.
Right.
But enrolled at the Healy.
So you guys are doing remote learning yourselves.
Yes, absolutely.
How many of the school committee members have school-age kids? I imagine a fair number of them do. I mean,
I believe, I want to say all of them except for Dr. Emily Ackman, whose children will be joining in the next year or two. So she did what I did and got on before her kids were school-age ready. But
so how's it going? I mean, how much do you do? Does your wife do some? How do you?
So, so I think, it's tough, right? And for us, we were able to somewhat do a full court press. I am fortunate that my job provides me enough flexibility that I can do some of it. My wife's finished up grad school, so she does some of it. It's like for every other family, it's a constant. Well, what's your day look like today? Well, can you do this? Can you do that? Juggling act, right? We are fortunate that I say fortunate. As a parent, I go back and forth on it. But for better or worse, our daughter is, for someone who's going to turn 7 next week, fairly tech adept. So we manage the time, but by and large, at this point, she manages the tech, which gives us an edge on, some families. But learning is tough for everybody, right? Like, Maddie would rather be at school. We'd rather have her at school. Like, absolutely. It's a juggling act, and we lean heavily into our class privilege to make it work.
So do you think she's getting what she needs for the moment or not?
Yeah, so I think Somerville, by making the decision to start remote, was able to really develop what I think, and when I look at other districts, I believe is complete sincerity, is one of the most robust remote learning plans in the state. And I think when we do get back to even hybrid, that will still be an advantage because even in the hybrid plan, most of your time will be remote. So I think we've done that. Obviously, I think the minute we can get, especially for our younger kids, the back in a classroom, the better. But I do think we have done a good job with remote as well as you can do such a thing. And I was talking to Matt yesterday, and she was like, it was tough for a few days, but now I really like it.
So how would you rate the district in implementing the remote learning plan on a scale of 1 to 10?
That's a tough question because, I don't actually have anything, there's no frame of reference, right? Like, it's not like something.
Well, you can punt. I've been asking questions of everyone different.
Right. So I'm not going to full on punt.
Okay.
I will say that obviously what we heard quite strongly in the summer was that the fall couldn't look like the spring did. And so on that comparison, I think we've more than aced that test. I think, if we were to do this over again, there are things we've already learned we would probably do differently.
Anything in particular?
I said that, and as soon as I was like, she didn't ask me for detail specific. I don't know that I have one.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm confident that we haven't done the perfect job, right? Like, this is our first time doing this. But I think I'm sort of satisfied. So I'm gonna give it a solid B.
Okay.
B plus.
Okay. So what have other school-age parents been saying to you? Either people through the school committee or just your neighbors or?
Better than my kid or someone else's remote learning and even hybrid learning are gonna make learning opportunity gaps worse, right? Like I said before, for my family, we are definitely leaning into our class privilege to make this work as well as possible. And it's not an option that's available to a lot of families. And obviously, I've also heard there are definitely parents who want us in the buildings yesterday. And I sympathize with those parents immensely, emotionally. Like, I don't think anyone disagrees that all remote learning is not what's best for kids. But I think, if I'm being perfectly honest, I think what's best for kids isn't on the table right now, right? What's best for kids was us to spend 50 years investing in urban infrastructure. What's best for kids is for us to have state and federal leadership that took this seriously in the spring and funded things accordingly.
So I don't have a child in the system anymore. Carrie Norman and I each have a son who was 2019 Somerville High School grad.
Congratulations.
So, thank you. So I don't have a sense of what this looks like on the ground. So I was trying to look at websites and that kind of thing. So a first grader, or no, maybe it was a kindergartner, is supposed to be, I guess, online 1 to 2 hours with breaks, and then have 4 more hours of independent study. Is that a district or a state or where does that come from?
That comes from the district, and it comes from, and I can walk you through my daughter's schedule if you want me to, but it comes from the realization that 6 hours in a Zoom call, having done it for work, is brutal for an adult, right?
No,
it's brutal for an adult. And it's not, there's no way you get a student to pay attention for that long. So trying to figure out developmentally appropriate amounts of screen time, with the caveat, of course, that the other side is that, at least for my daughter, the experience is the synchronous time with the teacher is the part she actually gets out of, right? But she couldn't do that for 6 hours. There's no way. If my daughter's spending 6 hours on computers, but she's playing Minecraft. So I think the idea was to figure out development appropriate ways to do it. It also means that we're doing a lot more small group work because a Zoom call with 23 people also doesn't work for extended time, especially for small.
Especially people are singing, as I found out at Mobile, does not work.
Right. Yeah. And there's always the awkward moment at school committee meetings where we do the pledge.
Yes,
and
I see.
you can't do the pledge synchronously over Zoom, or GoToMeeting is what we use for that. And also, I think we've all made the decision that we're going to sit and hold our hands, because this looks better than standing up and basically having 9 shots of our stomachs while we stand to do the pledge. So, yeah, I think it's. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so the first couple of hours are supposed to be synchronous. So does that mean that the student is interacting with a teacher who is there live online, as opposed to watching a video of a previously whatever?
So synchronous, if I never say the word asynchronous after the school year, I'll be happy. So synchronous, yes, refers to live interactive experiences with the teacher. And, I think the MOU that governs STA, I think on this part was actually pretty robust. We've said that teachers are expected to be available synchronously for 3 to 4 hours a day. And that means for students, like, Maddie's class is split into 3 groups: the lions, the penguins, and the butterflies. And so, like, they'll do the Maddie's a penguin, which makes her happy because that's her favorite animal.
Which is she?
She's a penguin, which is her favorite animal, so she's thrilled.
Excellent.
But yeah, so they do 3 small groups for English and for math. So yeah, I think so. There's a synchronous part, which for the first grader is going to be. I did the math before this. Yeah, she comes in just under 2 hours a day for being on synchronous time, including specialists. And for high schoolers, it's more.
Right.
But then, yes, and there's the asynchronous time, which, I think as all this ramps up, the asynchronous time is getting more and more structured. So like the first week for Maddie really was, here's some websites, go explore them. So one of the websites. Now she's getting more official assignments, and I think that's right. I think ramping it up slowly is the right call.
Right.
Even though as a parent, it means it's hard to stay in a rhythm.
Are there some things that are either not teachable or just tremendously challenging to teach? Like, how do you teach a child to read in a natural kind of way?
So reading is obviously. No, I think reading is the one that comes up. That's the one everyone says. The reason everyone wants small children back in school first.
Right.
And I certainly think it's harder to teach a child how to read remotely. But I've seen progress in Maddie just in this last month on this front. It's obviously a child of a sample of one, a child with 2 college-educated parents and all of the advantages. So I think, while it's certainly harder, I think, especially if we're doing high-quality remote learning, I think it's definitely still doable. What I worry about for the remote things we can't do remotely are some of our special ed services. I think our special ed teachers and department are trying very hard to be creative, and they're doing outdoor assessments, but I think there's just certain things you can't do remotely. And I think that's parents are concerned about it, right to be concerned about that. And it's one of the reasons, absolutely, as soon as we can start getting people into buildings, we need to start doing that. The other one, and I think this is the one I think is under talked about, but super important, is teaching people English. We have a remarkably talented EL teaching staff, but what we're asking them to do right now is pretty close to impossible. Especially, mostly for our what they call 1 and 2s. So like the very beginning, speak very little English. It gets to a point where it works better remotely, and actually, I've heard stories from other districts that there are cases for high school students learning English where this is working better for a number of reasons. But for especially in Somerville, where a lot of our low English speakers are younger kids, it is really hard to do that remotely well.
So now, since you brought up special needs. So special needs students and ELL, English language learners, aren't those two groups that the district is trying to carve out either a space or a program or something that's more, that's less computer reliant? So how
Yes.
is that happening, or is it too soon?
So,
Or?
there is the issue that, technically speaking, all the city's buildings are still closed. We are working with the city. We are looking at other options. We're looking at other options. Yes, the district and school committee feel adamantly that the moment it becomes possible to begin in-person instruction with ELL and special education students, we should do so. And what is to make that possible, we are open to ideas.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about teachers a little bit. Do you have a sense of what the biggest challenges are for teachers now? Do they?
I think if you ask any teacher, they'll tell you remote teaching is much harder than in-person teaching.
Why? I mean, I could guess, but why do they say?
Well, I think let's start from the beginning, which is it's not what they are hired to do, right? Like, it's not what they're trained to do. It's not what we hired them to do. You take a completely different skill set, and it's one they've had to pick up on the fly. I think let's start there. It also requires a lot more planning. As I mentioned, I've been a teacher, and I always tell people point blankly that when I was teaching, the most important class I took in college was improv. And you can't improv your way through a remote class. It's all got to be planned out. It's all got to be structured. You have to have an agenda for every minute and for every student in a way that, especially if you're an experienced teacher, you probably don't in person. You can ride the rhythm of the class in a different way. So it requires a lot more planning.
So I know that there were more counselors hired in the spring. I think the number was doubled, and there was talk of hiring even more now in the fall. Has that helped in general? Has that taken some burden off of the teachers who I would imagine normally are involved in social emotional learning, but having more counseling available, has that helped?
So again, it's one of those places where it's hard to know because there's no baseline, right? What we have, we do know that when we come back to partial in person, we're going to have to face some staffing changes, right? Like, especially in the area of mental health, right? And not just because of the weird hybrid, but our students, especially our Black and Brown students, have gone through a year of trauma. We've, as a term I picked up from a Newton School community member, if you're a person of color in America, you've gone through a trendemic this year. You've seen this both the spike of frankly white supremacy, but also this conversation about racism, and you're going through a virus that predominantly has hit Black and Brown communities. And so, and the climate depression, which is, again, predominantly hit Black and Brown communities. Right. So our students have gone through some stuff since we were last together in person. And when we are back together in person again, that is something we're going to have to deal with in explicit ways. So we know that's coming. Right. We know that, I always say when talk about, my desire to get kids back in class as soon as possible, one of the things that frankly keeps me up at night is that we've seen in this country over the last 7 months absolute cratering in domestic violence claims. And it strikes everyone who thinks about this as highly unlikely that somehow when everyone's trapped together in their houses, domestic violence incidents have gone down. It's just that we're not seeing them or hearing them because a lot of the times we found about them because kids come to school. So we know that there is, a mental health, emotional health.
There's so many ripples to this. There's so many ripples to it. I think there's going to be some sort of large shift. And I might be positive, it might be negative, it might be something in the middle, but I don't see how our education system, how, so many things are going to be almost sort of permanently affected, maybe not damaged, but permanently. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I think, and I think that it shouldn't go back to the way things were, right? Like,
Yeah.
one of the lessons of 2020 is, COVID exposed every crack in our social foundation, right? We shouldn't go back to the way things were, right? We shouldn't go back to a system that was inequitable, produced disparate results, was underfunded. No, it's not something we want to go back to.
So are we, I didn't expect to get quite this philosophical about things, but is this remote learning, if everybody has access to the internet, is there some more equitable kind of education going on now? Or is it just that everybody is getting something less than they should be getting? Not the real apple, but a picture of the apple. You know what I'm saying? Hello? What happened?
My internet connection seems to have.
What?
So I think, I just, I am so sorry about that.
What happened?
I had a moment of unstable internet.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that was I was getting kind of intense in my questions there. So
no, I heard the question basically about the changes, and I think it's a good one. So I can start the answer if you want, or you can re-ask the question. Anyway.
Well, just sort of there's this big having used remote learning for whatever period of time we use it, will that have some sort of leveling effect? Given a perfect world where everyone has internet access, will some of the iniquities for persons of color versus not, will some of that be at least temporarily changed with
so
approach?
I think that to me is a bad news, good news question. I think in the short term, every inequity in education is going to be worse, right? I think we're going to see in the short term increased opportunity gaps. We're going to see outcomes. That's just, I think that's the nature of what the pandemic has done to us as a society.
Okay.
I do think that if we're doing our jobs correctly, there'll be things we learn from this moment that we can use to build more equitable schools. And I do think, our experience with remote learning will help us figure out, more ways to be flexible to meet student needs, right? Like, there are definitely students who are going to thrive this year who didn't before. And it is incumbent upon us to figure out why that was and what we can use to make more of that. I do think that we are going to build support systems this year for students and families that we will be able to use in years to come to combat some inequities. And I do think we've had a year of stress testing our ability to reimagine schools that we should hopefully use to do better and continue to be innovative and imaginative as we should be.
It's nice to have, we only have a few minutes left, so it's nice to be heading in an optimistic direction. So I wanted to ask you, I know this is ongoing, but the building assessment study report, whatever that's going on, can you update us or explain what that is?
Sure. So I am not an engineer by any stretch of imagination, so I'm not going to try to get into details.
Okay.
Although Rich Rach is coming to the Finance and Facility Subcommittee meeting of the school committee next week.
So who is he? Because I couldn't place
Rich
him.
Rach He works for the city. He basically handles capital improvements, so like the building. So Somerville, and this is not uncommon for urban districts. Somerville, the city of Somerville is responsible for the actual maintenance of Somerville public school buildings. And so the capital improvements are handled by Rich Rach's his department. The day-to-day maintenance and cleaning is handled by DPW and their staff. And the decision to close city buildings is a city decision.
So is he a city or a schools
He is
person?
a city. So Rich Rach is a city employee.
Okay. And I pardon me if I already asked you this, but are teachers required to be in the classroom?
Teachers are not required to be in the classroom.
Okay.
I know that was something the state tried to push. We think it's foolish, and we think
I don't get that. If it's not safe for the kids, why is it?
The point? Well, because the point is the state is trying to pressure schools to be in person.
Right.
And that has been their position since they released their terrible initial guidelines.
Yeah.
Their guidelines are not what is best for students, what is best for teachers. It's how do we get kids back in the buildings as soon as possible. So that, and it's frankly, it's not even because they necessarily think that's what's best for kids. It's because they want employers want their employees back, and that's not going to happen in a meaningful way until schools are back in person, full person. Like they were surprised when schools said we can't do 100%, even if everything is fine, because we can't do social distancing and fit our kids in the building, which is okay. We are in Somerville, right? We can't do 100% in person and maintain social distancing guidance. We can't. Physics is a thing.
So this assessment, there's this study, right? That's going to come out in several weeks, and then is it? There's going to be soliciting bids for. So what exactly?
All right. So I will apologize for mastering this. Is incredibly complicated, but the bid soliciting process is already beginning.
Okay.
The report is coming out in a few weeks, and my understanding, and I could be completely wrong on this, but my understanding as things currently stands, the reason for the delay is because the report isn't a report; it's a series of notes and instructions, and so to make it usable for the public, it's got to be turned into a report.
Okay, got you. All right, so there's almost too much to ask here. Do you have any sense of well, okay, I'll be specific. So the high school. So is there a chance, I think I asked someone this before, if the high school is completed before it's deemed safe for the students to go back, is the high school going to be used for something very different, or is that putting the cart before the horse?
So I think it depends, right? Like, so we will hope to know as soon as next week what the timeline is for getting the earliest buildings back online. And that December 1st is the date that's been bandied about. We hope that's accurate. And if we have buildings that are available December 1st and buildings that are available January 1st, that's a very different decision than buildings that are available December 1st and buildings that are available February 1st, right? And so, I think if we think all buildings or enough buildings will be online in January, then we treat December buildings differently than if we think, well, these are the buildings we're going to have for 3 months. So I think trying to predict what buildings will be used for what purposes until we have a timeline is just idle speculation. I think as a practical matter, I think the reality is that we're going to try to use the high school as a high school, right? Okay. We have 1,300 students.
We actually have to stop now, so we do not have to make any more predictions. So this has been School Committee Update with Andre Green, Ward 4 member. I'm Sarah Fishman. Have a great day.